Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 8 of the Rewatch podcast presented by the Terrible Video Gamers Club. I'm your host for the episode, Tyler Schatz, the smartest Lannister in the War Council outside of Tywin. Joining me tonight here to continue on our Game of Thrones watching quest is Stephen Howard.
Hi, the dumbest Lannister outside the War Council.
Nick Castillo.
This man has the honor of being Nick Castillo.
Gary Delaney.
Sexiest Lannister.
And Amanda Howard.
I'm Amanda.
Alright, so for tonight's episode here, we watched episode 5, The Ghost of Harrenhal, and episode 6, The Old Gods and the New. So just jumping right into episode 5 here, I wanted to point out here too, I couldn't remember if these were pointed out in episode 4, but in the opening credits there we had Harrenhal being shown for, I think, the first time in the credits there, or maybe the second time, I couldn't remember. And then also Karth was there in the opening as well, the greatest city that ever was or will be.
Was Pike there before that? I saw Pike, and I
think Pike was in there the first time Theon made it there.
On the rewatch, as I'm trying to quickly burn through episodes, I'm just like, I'm just gonna skip the intro today because I gotta get to that Game of Thrones right away.
I get you.
I wanted to start it off here with this first question. It's kind of like right away in the beginning there. So Cersei and Tyrion are having a conversation with one another. I believe this is in the Red Keep castle there still, and they're talking about kind of the oncoming presence of Stannis basically being out there because they've learned that Renly is no longer with the living, so that way Stannis now has bolstered his army there even more. So it just kind of seems that Cersei is kind of walking around kind of not really feeling threatened by Stannis or anything like that. How do you guys think that, it seems like she doesn't want to share anything with Tyrion. She thinks, everything's going to be fine. She makes mention that the king's already preparing for the war and everything like that, which leads Tyrion going and investigating later on. But how do you guys think, does Cersei even think that Stannis poses any threat to them? Start off here with Nick. You were making the most head nods there.
I always be head nodding. I think that Cersei sees threats in proximity to her. As I was watching a little bit of that interaction, she's battling wits with Tyrion because proximity-wise, they're related. In proximity, he's in the room with her. I think that Stannis is a threat, but she doesn't really perceive him as the threat that he warrants because he's not right there. She's fearful of her father when he's nearby. When he's out, fighting the war, she mentions their father several times, but she's not scared of him. Whereas when threats are closer to her, they're more of a concern. Myrcella is her daughter. That threat of her losing her daughter that they make mention of in that interaction is a threat to her, and she's fearful of it. I don't think she really sees him as a threat. I think that she's acknowledging that he's a person who exists with ill intentions to her and her family, but it's not really something in her periphery.
Steven, nothing from you? You look like you were having kind of some concerns with the question there too.
Not really concerns. I go in a little different of a way. I kind of question her strategic judgment. Although she's been playing the game of politics for a really long time, I am not sure that she really understands great politics. So what you're talking about, politics between countries, politics or war fighting, stuff like that. So she sees the elimination of one competitor as a positive thing, and that's just it. There's no second tier, third tier, fourth tier effects that she's really worried about. She's looking at that number one, got the competitor out of the way. Gary got killed. We are all good. We're all going to benefit. It doesn't matter that Nick's going to take over Gary's land and now be more powerful than both of us. But it's so I guess I kind of see it as a little bit strategic naivety.
I think some of it's naive. Some of it's she was never trained in battle. She was trained to she was trained to be the wife. She was trained to be married off. So she like never needed to know like war, be threatened, because she always had, well, up to the last 15 years had Robert Baratheon by her side, and nobody f's with him.
Right, and her brother was like one of the greatest swordsmen. Like I think until now she's been rather. It's easy for those who haven't lived through a war just to assume, fine, I've got all the advantages.
Yeah, I just think that she's not worried because she doesn't understand enough to how badly like they're outmatched.
Yeah. I think that, I'm not trying to jump back an episode, but Varys has that interaction with Tyrion about where does power reside with the wealthy person, the religious person, or the king, and they forbade the sell sword to kill one another. Power resides where people believe it resides. And so Cersei's like, I'm the queen. And to her, that's unquestionable that anybody else would really scare her at this point, I think.
All right. Another question I wanted to bring up is this came a little bit later here with Davos talking to Stannis as they're walking basically into Renly's camp there. Davos keeps trying to bring up because he saw that monster come out of the red woman there basically. So he keeps trying to bring this up to Stannis like, I need to talk to you about what this was, what happened and everything. And then it just kind of seems too like Davos just, to me it seems like Davos is like the last person who's basically, and maybe this is why Stannis kind of keeps him around. Davos is kind of that last person in Stannis' kind of circle there that's not really afraid to say something truthful to Stannis and be not really have to worry too much about the consequences there. So like we kind of think that Davos is really the last person kind of in Stannis' circle that's, I don't want to say brainwashed by the Red Woman, but he's not really like under her control, it seems like.
Yeah, I think he had a lot of yes men around him, and that's only intensified by the presence of the Red Woman, who it's all to her or nothing. So I do believe he is the last person that's willing to say anything truthful to him, or anything, I guess, that he might not want to hear. Maybe not particularly truthful or not truthful, but in that same regard, Stannis is showing he's not going to listen to him. The big thing that they don't talk about there is the killing of Renly. And he tries to bring up over and over and over how Renly was killed. And Stannis's response to that every single time is, I don't want to know. And he, in the end, never gets told what actually happens. It's just taken as, and taken as what it is. And Davos proceeds to basically a check down position where he says, well, this is what it's going to look like if you do X with Melisandre, the Red Woman. And it's not really broaching the issue. It's not broaching the dark magic that Stannis really used. It's just a check down to try to get her out of the way.
I don't think Stannis wants to know or cares to know how it happened. He just is, I don't know. I think maybe that's a sign that it scares him. Like, he thinks he'd be better off not knowing what happened. Like, imagine it wasn't all this magic. Just imagine that he just sent in an assassin. Like, does he really want to know how his brother was killed? He just needs to know that his brother is no longer in the way. Like, he doesn't really want to know any details. He just, like,
I wonder if
it got done.
Yeah, I agree. I wonder if it also conflicts with his image of himself as he does the right thing. He is like he told that to Sir Davos. He was like, I punished you for the bad and I rewarded you for the good. And I really feel like he can't look at himself and see this, like he did this bad thing.
And I think that, oh, sorry.
Oh, no, that's fine. It just, I wonder if that is so strange to him compared with what he would think of a good king. That's another thing. Like, I don't want to know about it because that's just something that I know I'm not going to like and it's going to be bad, and it's complicated for him. Maybe he
Yeah.
didn't love his brother, but he also knows it was a bad thing to do. It was an evil thing.
Sure.
And to echo that as well, I mean, he even says, it's either during this conversation or a conversation a little later, but all Banner Lords that went over to his side are lucky that he's not going to kill them. That is his justice. They went to his side, and he's lucky he's not gonna kill them. I mean, yeah, he's still got the justice thing going on. He just murdered someone via black magic, but I guess he's still the just ruler.
I think it maybe it too kind of ties back into what we were talking about last episode too, of the conflict of Stannis, of the ends justify the means there. Like, his ultimate goal is he wants to be on the throne. If he doesn't know what happened, as long as his brother died, which is basically one of the things blocking his path to get to the end goal there, the ends ultimately justify the means, even if it is having to use, dark magic, selling his soul to the Red Woman and all of that.
And like we said in the last episode too, it's the ends justify the means for him, but for everyone else, the means are what matters. It's not the ends. He doesn't care about their ends. He cares about their means.
Right. You gonna say something, Gary? You look like you're...
I'm gonna say, like, his brother was the last step that he needed, because up until this point, not trying to move ahead, like, now he has an army that, as we talk about in the Cersei conversation, like, the capital should be afraid of. Like, and he has a knowledgeable force that, like, they say that he recruited the pirate. So he has knowledgeable people, like, commanding ships who are going to facilitate the, like, water-based combat. And obviously he probably has people that could facilitate the ground-based combat. So, like, he's got the resources now. So, like, ultimately, his brother was the one step between him getting the resources he needed to facilitate the future for him.
I think that in that conversation with Stannis and Davos, they have that phrase where they say the hard truth swings both ways. They're kind of, like you said, they're talking to each other about, if you acknowledge that this did happen and how it happened, it'd be better than if you just kind of brush it off and hide it under the rug. It's really interesting how that whole scene played out, because I think that he is kind of one of the last few people who can kind of talk to Stannis versus addressing the king. I also we kind of skipped over Renly's actual deceasement. But it was interesting. I kind of remembered that Brienne ends up with Catelyn at some point, and like I had forgot how that transaction all went down, and I didn't remember that Catelyn was in the room when it happened. And I was like, how do they... Oh, okay. Oh, never mind. There we go. It all just happened right away at the start of this episode. I thought it was really interesting, not to go forward and then jump back, but I thought it was interesting how everybody instantly assumed that Brienne had did it. Like, when those two guards came in, it seemed like she was... I mean, maybe because she's of different stature and she's a female and all this gender stuff, but I think that it was really interesting that since she's like the one who was at Renly's side, the closest to have his back, yet she was the first one who everyone suspected was the one who did it when they came in the room. I don't know, just proximity because she was standing next to him. But yeah.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, she's the only one in there, which makes her suspect, but I also feel like she's suffering from the same thing Tyrion does. People already don't like her, so they're ready to blame her for anything.
True.
So, as Nick brought it up, crazy CGI question, as this CGI is very early on in the series. Like, did the CGI look anything like Stannis? It's supposed to be assumed that the dark figure looked like Stannis, and I believe maybe it was even referenced in the books that the shadow was supposed to look like Stannis. Like,
it was, but if I hadn't been told, I would not have known.
Yeah.
And I thought that too, trying to watch for some of those things. Now that we've witnessed them again, we can talk about them. I also did not see that. It looked like a person. They like screamed, and it looked more like a skull than it did Stannis.
That was a black mass of humanoid shape.
Mm-hmm.
Feel like that's just a cinematography fail. You just need to have like a superimposed Stannis actor face, like just woo.
I
This
think
is
too,
it. We have found why everybody hates Game of Thrones. All right, everyone else is going to be roses moving forward.
All right, guys, let's pack up. Let's go home. Mission accomplished. Put up the
Doesn't
banner.
matter. Yep. Doesn't matter. They've
The
got
moment-
dragons and all these cool
I
scenes.
just imagine the giant
Mess with the shadow.
face Stannis.
yeah, maybe they could have like changed the shot just slightly to be more to one side so you can actually see in the mirror the face or something like that. But yeah, did not at all think it looked like Stannis, really. Just a black humanoid shape, like Steven mentioned there.
Poor
All right.
writing.
Throw this over to Amanda here. What do you got for some questions for this episode, Amanda?
I that quaint little conversation after Renly's death between Marjorie Tyrell and Littlefinger, and she's realizing like that's her plans are down the drain. But he asks her, "Do you want to be a queen?" And she says, "No, I want to be the queen."
Boom.
And very perfect, captured in just a little 2-sentence remark there. But I mean, that's interesting because until then, I think we could have all just dismissed her as like, oh, she's just someone he married so that he could get the Tyrells. But that implies there might be more ambition out of Marjorie Tyrell, more coming out of her than we expected in the first place.
Yeah, she goes from being just the sexy character to the like, oh shit, is this gonna be the woman who sticks this dagger in your back? And also, by the way, Rip Renly, sexiest man in the show.
I thought the same thing too. The show does a really good job of giving really complex characters. Even some of these characters that you see a couple episodes of, like she was in the last one, and I think just briefly teased in the previous one. But you really don't get to know them. And yeah, it's a very succinct little conversation that shows that she's got some motivation and some drive for who she wants to be and aspire to. So that was a really good interaction as well.
I give some of that to the actress who portrays her, that like she can very much flip that switch between like, oh, like she's got some politics and some things going on underneath the pretty facade, like, oh, do you want me to bring you my brother in? Like, we can do it with him, with you, like with both of us together, however you like.
Any of you ever seen the Tudors? Television
Yes.
show that was on?
Yeah.
She was Anne Boleyn in that. She plays a pretty gnarly character as far as, yeah, like you said, someone who can flip the switch from that sweet and innocent to totally like, you know, I'm gonna come after you. What did you say? Stick a knife in your back? Yeah. Good stuff.
I thought she did a great job of it. I think they cast her really well. Even though in the book she's supposed to be like 14 or something.
Oh, really? Interesting.
Isn't
Yeah,
she supposed to be like
totally different
ridiculously
scene.
young?
I still find her in the book a little not. I don't want to say duplicitous because she's not really duplicitous. She's conniving. She has ambition, but I think that she plays it very well, and I think that yeah, she's supposed to be 14. She's a really fucking vicious. If you're gonna say she's 14, she knows what she wants as a 14-year-old.
See, I have to reread the books again to be sure, but in the books I remember like she totally sold the sweet thing. Like I was always wondering later on watching the show when they were showing us like, you know, she's got this ability. Like in the books, like I never caught that. I always caught like completely sweet. So I'm sitting there wondering, is she actually this absolutely sweet and perfect, or is there something behind it? Because I almost hope it's that, because it was beautiful job. You never suspect, because sometimes in shows they want to make it obvious to us as the viewers, like this is what's happening.
Right.
Her role is something that, as the Rewatch podcast, on a rewatch, you start to notice the complexity of which.
Oh yeah.
To take a Cersei line, how she is playing the Game of Thrones.
Mm-hmm.
Very much so. Yeah, really interesting to see the early stages of these characters again, knowing, you know, the full how they're going to evolve over the course of the show. Seeing them now, you're like, oh, so naive, and then going back, you're like, this explains kind of how you get to be so terrible.
Also, the introduction of the Queen of Thorns, later in the season. Something.
There goes Gary, just jumping ahead.
Spoilers.
I don't ruined anything because I think I completely misdirected what her title is.
I think they did mention Highgarden, like that they would get their horses and take back to Highgarden, which is the house seat of the Tyrells, way out in the Reach, off to the west.
Because Loras wants to avenge.
Yeah. Which again, it speaks. Sorry, not to jump on your point there. You can speak.
No.
Like talking about understanding who these characters are. We see Loras in that fight against Brienne. He is a tough knight, but clearly Brienne is the better fighter. So Loras is strong, but he might be kind of scrawny. He's not a really big buff character like we would think of as the Mountain or Sandor, Clegane, the Hound. And so I think that he's brave and he's definitely valiant wanting to avenge Renly, but he's willing to throw his life away. And same for Brienne. She's willing to fight the entire army, the armada that's coming to make landing to fight Renly's men. And so I think that these characters have, kind of speaking to that naiveness at this early stage in their development, where we see that they're tough, they're willing to go down swinging, but they're not wise, right? I mean, we as viewers can see that's a terrible decision. We agree with Littlefinger. We agree with Catelyn Stark that this is not how you avenge somebody. So it's interesting to see those people make those decisions, and you're like, interesting.
Because I talked about Loras, I was sort of thinking about the character connection or the character traits between him and Jaime Lannister. They're both from royal families. They're both are excellent swordsmen and knights. They both wear very, very nice armor. They're both the oldest son in their house, so the heir apparent. And just how so Loras in this episode is like, trying to fight to avenge his lover. And in season 1, Jaime was willing to kill Ned Stark as to get Ned to release his brother Tyrion. So just very much people that do anything for family, but
you have a lot of similarities. Both very
Yeah,
close to their sisters. I think.
Well, I'd say more than that, they have a forbidden love that both of them can't attain.
This is true.
Forbidden
and
love.
I think this is jumping ahead in the books, but at one point Jaime even says of Loras, when he's watching just the arrogance that you get, he said that he thought to himself, this is what you get from being too good at too early of an age. You just the arrogance, you can't just have that and not have the arrogance that goes along with it.
Yeah, but Jaime's a little bit more intelligent, and Loras is really dumb. You don't keep Loras around for his brain. You keep him around for other things.
Yeah, but do we think
can we say?
Do we think Jaime was that intelligent at that age, though? Jaime's got the benefit of years to look back on and see it.
Right.
Jaime's got a lot of kids by this point, so who can say?
This is true. And he'd gone through a lot more hell, but then by that time than Loras had.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Anyway. That one.
All right. Did you have anything else, Amanda?
Nope.
All right. Go to Gary here.
A lot of my points for this episode sort of revolve around Dany and her plot line. It was just, I found it interesting that Zaro, Zone, and Daxus proposes to Dany, and just sort of Dany's still trying to be I'm still married to Khal Drogo. But also as part of that conversation, I'm going to struggle saying Zaro, Zone, and Daxus multiple times, but is the first person to inform Dany that Jorah is in love with her. So it's sort of seeing that realization that that Jorah loves Dany, and then later on in that a different scene, it becoming real for Dany that Jorah is in love with her, because when Jorah talks about Dany, he's like, "Oh, you're a great leader and you have a kind heart." just sort of like putting his cards on the table that he does really like love her, but he can only communicate it in such a way as like about how a great leader you are. Because he's a disgraced knight from the north who can never go back home. So,
Another
I
forbidden
find-
love.
Yeah, I find that entire interaction creepy as heck. I will lie, because he's what, 45 or something like that, and she's supposed to be maybe 16.
Yeah, he's definitely older in the books than she is, because again, the
Mhm.
show ages all the characters up quite a bit to make it not as
It's-
creepy.
That is creepy.
Yeah,
is
No, I-
Jordan look all that much older?
yeah, he's real old.
A middle-aged man because he had to abandon Bear Island because he sold someone into slavery, and then. But I just assumed he was like a young man when that happened, so he was maybe in his 30s or something.
He may have been a younger man when he originally did the selling of the slaves, but he's been banished for quite a while, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
But I know he's definitely an older guy in the books for sure.
As we talked about earlier, forbidden love. Just
Yeah.
forbidden love.
To your point, Gary, on that conversation too, yeah, it was really interesting. Very telling of Jorah. He had a line that I tried to keep in my mind about. He's like, I have to remind myself each day that you're real, or something like that. Like he's full on like almost quoting Shakespeare to her. And it's that moment between two friends where one of them says, "Oh, you're so great, I love you," and they're like, "Oh, and they just kind of like awkwardly stand there for a second before he takes his bow and leaves at her request. And she has this moment where she's like contemplating. She's like, "Holy crap, he does really care for me." And I thought that was really interesting too, because they have a really interesting relationship. You know, out externally, well, maybe not even externally, internally, Dany has said several times, he's my advisor, he's my protector, right? So she sees him maybe more as something she can use as a protection against the outside world. Whereas in that scene and what we're discussing, you can tell that Jorah is very much facing towards her and much more of a, inward an inward analogy. So I thought that was really interesting too, of how like it's really like side swiped her that she didn't see that sooner. But yeah, clearly, like you said, the dude whose name that you have a hard time mentioning, and everybody else can see it. Everyone else knows that that's what he's thinking about. So yeah, a really interesting scene.
Jorah's trying to protect her, and so he's kind of a father figure. I don't know. Like, is that she always thought of him as the she never had, and it's the creepy realization that he doesn't feel the same way.
Creepy realization that your dad likes you.
We're
Yeah.
gonna go off topic real fucking quick.
It's
also,
sorry.
Zara's Zone and Daxus comes off slightly creepy too, in a completely different way. Like, hey, I met you like 2 days ago. Like, do you want to get married?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. You're right.
You guys mentioned that quote though when he said, "I still can't believe you're real," when Jorah was talking to Daenerys. I saved that one because I was looking at because he goes on a whole thing. He goes, "You have a good claim. You have a title, a birthright. You have more than that. You can cover it up, but you have a gentle heart. You would not only be respected, but
Right.
like he goes on." Where's he getting his information from this from? Yes, he's known her, but she has not had much ruling. She was a Khaleesi, but like she was not in charge of the Khalasar. She's only shown the leadership of getting them through the Red Waste, and that is it so far. Like I feel like he's really building her up here. He even said centuries can come and go without a person like that.
Right.
Okay,
Right.
well, what are you basing this on, dude?
I think that
Like,
he has an idealized version of her, and
Yeah.
I agree.
he's definitely sees her through the rose-colored glasses, where this is someone who I'm gonna not only follow but devote myself to, even despite her flaws. Because yeah, like you said, what is he basing this on? The other side of the coin, the reality is that she has wandered them through the Red Waste. She lost her husband. She doesn't really have any power or knowledge of what the Khalasar should be doing, and they're just kind of like existing.
Yeah, I think he's building like everything he said there was what he wanted in her.
Right.
not necessarily. She was given a lot of, I mean, maybe a lot of training in history in terms of like what she was given a tutor and she was taught her the history, but she does not have battle strategy. She does not have leadership experience. She's only just started. She didn't even have the experience of like ruling a castle or anything.
But that's really realistic in terms of love, and if you're seeing somebody that you think that you love, you super idealize them and you pretend that they are just the tippy top of whatever, even though they might be a base cur.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I think that's his problem. And I'll be the last one to say that a woman couldn't rule something, but I think that's another problem. Like we were talking with Cersei, is the problem is they're not given this training. Like it's really hard to win these battles when you're given no training either. You have to be extraordinarily gifted just to learn it yourself, or lucky enough to have a commander that can do it for you. Still, allow you to rule. Jorah might do that. So far, he's not seeing the road, he's not seeing the reality in front of him yet.
There are people in this show that we've been introduced with who are kind of born with great power or great might behind them, and they've existed just because that might is never challenged. And we have people who are born with nothing but have the extreme fortune of having dragons to their name or having, a strong enough army. Like the North has so much men that they're winning, even though Robb Stark hasn't really been in many battles. He probably has the men who are hardy and sturdy enough to fight from the North. That he's winning battles. And so he has this might, even though he might not have the expertise that Tywin's men have from the south. So yeah, it's this interesting back and forth play about the idealized version of what we think, how we think things are going to go, and then the reality that, it could change at any moment.
All right. Do you have anything else there, Gary?
I did not have anything else. I did not take a lot of notes on this episode.
All right. Nick, you're up.
I had a little bit in this episode on the interaction from Jon and Jorah. Mormont up in Georg Mormont, not Jorah. Georg Mormont, up in north of the Wall. It's interesting that I kind of kept thinking back to like the early first episodes we saw of Jon when he was talking about the Rangers and he was talking with his uncle Benjen, how he always idolized the Rangers as these super tough individuals and that they always knew what to do and they could survive in any environment. And how you constantly just see the other Rangers, his good friend Ed and I forgot his other friend's name.
Gren?
What?
Gren,
maybe. The two other Rangers that are there with he and Sam. And clearly they're just like fumbling around. Like all the Rangers in the North are not like trained, hardened soldiers that Jon has envisioned them as. They're all just kind of like, this weather sucks. That's the iconic picture too of Jon in the North is just him standing there with the wind blowing around. I was like, yeah, that's the meme. But it kind of shows that he's realizing again, maybe, I didn't mean to tie this in very nice with the transition, but that's his idealized version being shattered of what he thought life was going to be like north of the Wall. Is he kind of thought that we're this glorious, going to defeat the wildlings type thing. And instead he's stuck in the cold north of the Wall. Nobody really has any idea what to do. And his idolized war hero companions are all talking about how, these wildlings are not like normal wildlings. Under Mance Rayder, they're organized. And I think the one ranger that they meet up with who's doing scout reconnaissance is telling them when we hit them, they will hit back. Like they won't scatter. They're not just a random barbarian horde. Like they're going to hold tight because Mance Rayder used to be a ranger as well, and he's trained them. And so, he's seeing this idealized version that not all's, perfect in his world either. I thought that was really interesting. So that was the one item that I had. I was going to ask, what did you all think of the interaction that Jon is finding himself in?
The part with him kind of just going north of the Wall talking Gior and then trying to volunteer for the raiding party, right?
Yeah, well, kind of like, what he's finding out life is like at this point. Because he just left the interaction with Craster's Keep. So he's kind of got his tail tucked between his legs about, going his own way or being the son of a lord, under Ned Stark and Winterfell. Like, I'm going to do the right thing. And clearly everyone's just like, let Craster be Craster and don't ask questions. And so he's kind of like, I don't know how to act in this real world outside of what I should do. Like he has that one interaction where he calls the other ranger a lord. And the other ranger's like, I've been called many things. I am not a lord. Yeah, so I was going to ask, I thought that was really, again, telling of what John sees his world has become. And I was going to ask what your opinions was of that as well.
I think that you can kind of infer a little bit of it just based on the reaction, everyone around him, how they're acting compared to what he is. And you're looking at Samuel Tarly, who this is just the greatest little outing for historical walks ever for him.
Yes.
You have his two other friends, Ren, and I don't remember his other name, but they are just, this is just the worst. It is crap. It is shit. I'm sorry for cussing, but and that's their, it's not so much a depressing issue, it's just this is junk. This is horrible. And then you compare that with Robb, and Robb is kind of depressed. That iconic image that you're saying, he is staring off into the distance just like, what is this? What is any of this worth? What does this matter? Sort of thing. And it's a very different place than anyone else in the army right now because he had such different impressions of what it was going to be like. I think that his two friends came there with maybe more realistic impressions, and that's why they're just like, it sucks. Samuel Tarly is still in his own little world. But he was one of the few people that had, like you said, Nick, an idealized version of what was going to be happening up there. It's a, for lack of a better way of saying it, it's like the people who want to go fight in a war because all they see are the propaganda videos or the really cool Medal of Honor things where they survive and save all their friends, and I can do that. That's going to be me. Everyone's going to be heroic around me. It's going to be great. And then you get to war and it's shit. And it's just the worst thing on earth. And you have to come to grips with that. And it tells a lot about yourself. It doesn't say a lot about the situation around you, but it says a lot about yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. I adore Samuel on this one because we're all watching him being like, yeah, this guy's not going to make it. I love watching him on this little adventure. It's fantastic. But I also am seeing like John's realization. I mean, before he thought everything again was black and white, he had his own view of the world. Meeting the wildlings is another shock because that's not how it works. There's different people out there. There's a completely, they're not bad, you're good. There's not good, evil in that term.
Yeah, it's actually, I doubt they actually meant this, and so reading into it, but it is actually very poignant that the all of the oh my god, what are their soldiers called from the Black Wall, from the Ice Wall? It's
Rangers?
the
Night,
Rangers, yeah.
nice walk.
They wear straight black, and it is black and white for them. While you talk about all of the freemen, they wear gray because, and I mean, I'm reading into that. I really am, but they see it's a version of gray in the world. They don't wear black.
Good point. I never caught that actually. Also, wearing black when you're working in an icy world, terrible camouflage option, but that doesn't matter.
Absolutely. I do like both of those thoughts. Very spot on. I thought you made me think of something else in this episode when you talked about the real war is rough and gritty. Bronn has that comment later when he's talking with Tywin about the Dragonfire. He mentions, you're going to train all these troops to do these great things in war, but real men know war is rough. Men shit themselves, and people scatter when they see danger. And it's very true. Yeah, people have this glory-filled view of what that might be like to serve, but it is a totally different experience sometimes.
Yeah,
and I actually
great line though. I wish I would have written that down. It's like, what was it? Real men shit themselves. They fumble. They piss their pants. Like
they drop the fire everywhere, burn the place down.
Yeah, like a great line from that character and that actor. Like just perfectly delivered. Like just great line, perfectly delivered by that actor.
And that was one of the points I actually wanted to bring up, Nick, was that exact line. And it reminded me of how, I mean, a lot of the stuff we see in cinema is we can just take it as, oh, they're writing this just to sound cool. And that's a very real line, what he says there. And it reminded me of a video I saw from Luhansk of Russian soldiers firing artillery shells. And I'm not going into the politics of any of that, but the Russian soldiers are in this, at least in this case, are poorly trained. They are basically sliding artillery shells down a snowy hill to get to the artillery to fire it off, and because it's easy, and because they're poorly trained, and eventually one of them actually just blows up, and you hear everyone screaming and dying in the video, and that's exactly what would happen with a wildfire. Exactly.
I did want to call out one thing that I've always found just so strange, going back north of the wall there. The system for blowing the horn, signaling what's coming and stuff, is always so weird. One horn
right?
Signals rangers are coming.
Order of, yeah.
2 is for wildlings, 3 is for White Walkers. It's like... So you just get close enough to the wall, blow the horn once, hey, I'm coming back!
I mean, a lot of civilizations over the years have found very creative ways to make a lot more complicated of messages with less. So I wasn't. It makes it easy for us as the viewers.
Well, I'm always.
It doesn't.
Yeah, I'm sitting there sometimes wondering, like, is there going to be another horn blown at some point?
In time?
It's like, well, here's one long horn blown. Okay, so they must be in range. Oh, there's the second one. No, the wildlings are here.
And even like the priority of which way they're blowing. How about blow do do do, or like just what are you doing right now? You're waiting 5 seconds between each one so that everyone has to stand around and go,
okay, there's one.
What's going on?
It raises the drama. We need that.
Oh my god!
I know if I'm standing watch, I want the drama. I love that suspense. Am I gonna die? Oh no, they're just coming home. We're good.
Right.
No, they need to go talk to Sean Bean about how to blow a horn while running away and fighting, and then probably dying.
Exactly.
Yeah,
then
maybe
taking
it's not the
like
best
6
example.
arrows to the chest.
No?
All right.
I don't get the Sean Bean joke.
Lord of the Rings.
No?
Gary. Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Get with the program.
Come on.
Kidding, right, Gary?
Oh.
I do not acknowledge that trilogy. There's only one holy
Oh.
trilogy.
Let's pause the thing there because we were all dive deep into that whole shaming Gary there for that one. Nick, did you have anything else?
No, that was it. I'm good.
All right, Steven, back to you.
Well, Nick hit my first comment about the alchemical fire. My second comment was actually going to be a comment made offhand to Tyrion by Bronn when they are walking through the city together, and they're watching the preacher who will pay attention to that preacher. He's going places, but watching the preacher talk about how much the city's evil, there's a bastard king, etc., and he's guided by this dancing monkey, and Tyrion's like, oh, that's really funny. What does he mean by that? And Bronn's like, you're the dancing monkey, little man. And Tyrion's kind of like, wait, what? Which means that he's not really... He doesn't understand what's happening in the city. For all the great power politics he is doing, and all the scheming inside the palace, etc., he is not connected to what is happening in the city itself. He doesn't know that they see him as the puppet master behind Joffrey. And in that case, how capricious, arbitrary, and evil Joffrey is, Gary, how could you... If you see him as the one actually pulling those strings, yeah, that makes whatever Tyrion's actually trying to do, his lack of ability to frame his public image means that he is just as bad as Joffrey in the minds of the people that he is trying to rule, and that is everything. It is.
That's a very solid point. I hadn't put much of that into context other than just that one little interaction. But yeah, I mean, the people had lived with King Robert for so long, and if he seems like a drunkard and everything was secretly being run by Tywin, who was Hand of the King, and then it was Jon Arryn and all this other stuff, you would think, well, yeah, clearly the king's not the one in charge. It's the Hand who runs the council, who's telling everybody what to do, how to spend the gold, and yada, yada. Yeah, absolutely. It looks like then that just must be how the last organization did it. This is what's happening again. It's not Joffrey who's evil. It's this. I wonder if the common people think that he's the one who gave the signal to kill the babies then.
Yeah,
Interesting.
that's actually a really good point. I didn't even think about that.
The guy comes to town, kills all the babies.
I'm pretty sure they do blame him. I did also think, just an interesting note, that we still do this today and back through history in real life, that we blame the advisors behind the person in charge
Mm-hmm.
rather than the person in charge.
Right.
And a convenient thing through much of history. I mean, I suppose in terms of a king that actually is going to have you executed, it's also convenient to not be like, oh, I don't have a problem with the king. I have a problem with his advisor. See, I'm a loyal person.
Sure.
And I mean, I grant you, if I was in the situation, I might say that too, because I would like my head to stay on my shoulders.
Yeah.
Got anything else there, Steven?
Nope.
All right, I wanted to touch on a couple of quick things before we move on to the next episode. So this is the first episode where we have that nice conversation between Arya and Tywin at Harrenhal there, where Arya is trying to hide that she's a proper lady when talking to Tywin there, and she kind of slips up and asks, I think this is the episode. Nope, this isn't this. She just kind of slips up kind of with like her background story there, and Tywin catches on right away because Tywin's a very smart person and kind of knowledgeable about everything. But just these conversations between Tywin and Arya are pretty good there because Charles Dance is just fantastic for his role there.
Oh, those conversations between those two are absolutely fantastic to listen to. The kind of the verbal sparring that goes on, knowing one holds all the power, but the other one holds this little secret, which is you wonder, does he actually know the secret? And he's just such a you don't even know. It's just really fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
What about just thinking about Tywin, and you're saying he's like really a deductive person, and kind of thinking about like where did Tyrion learn it from? And it's like Tyrion is just always sort of portrayed as this master behind the scenes, but it's sort of the realization that like, well, he grew up that way because his father was not a great guy, but a very deductive guy, a very smart, like somebody who's very observant. And so that's where, Tyrion would pick that kind of skill up, and seeing the value of what those sorts of life skills can give you on a day-to-day basis when you're a lord.
Right.
And then also too, part of the Harrenhal scene, Arya ends up finding Jaqen H'ghai. Is it that how it is? Jaqen
Hagar.
Hagar, thank you. Finds him there, and he promises to give her the man who has 3 to repay the debt they owe the red. It's funny too. I mentioned this down. He kept mentioning the Red God, which is, as we know, the Lord of Light. So it's kind of like this eventual, as we get going there, I think it's kind of like the eventual tying in of like the Lord of Light and the God that kind of comes up later on. It seems to be kind of the same thing. I think they cover it just a little bit more when he starts talking about that his God and everything. But so the Red God is owed 3 lives for the fact that Arya spared the Jaqen H'ghai in the Hagar, in the cell there. It saved him and those 2 other people there. And then one question I wanted to ask here. Well, I got 2 questions here written down, but one I wanted to ask, and I don't really know if there's much of an answer for it, but it's always interesting to me when people in the northern area, when they want to swear loyalty to somebody or pledge their life to somebody or pledge something to somebody else, they always say by the old gods and the new. I don't understand that there, because I swear to you by the old gods and the new. Okay, are you both religions there, or I'm just kind of curious, like if anyone else kind of ever picks up on that, kind of maybe what their take on that is.
I would just take it as like trying not to offend somebody, like not knowing someone's personal politics, because to the Starks, if you were to say like, oh, I swear it to the 7, I swear it in the light of the 7, which is they'd be like, "Well, I don't give a care about that. Like, those are heathenistic gods." Whereas if you said, like, I swear by the old god, I don't know what, I forget what the old gods are called, but
Just the old gods.
It's the old gods, yeah. They don't really have a title. Like the werewood trees and yeah.
But in the same way, like, if for the people of King's Landing, if you swear to the old gods, are like, oh well, this is just a crazy mountain man from the north, like, he can't be trusted. So I assume it's just covering your bases. Like,
I think it might be just a little bit of the culture showing, honestly, because the culture is, I'm sure you still have people that worship the old gods, and I'm not sure so much it's a sign of covering your bases, but a sign of respect that you are swearing by all the gods around here, and if you're brought up in the north, you've got to understand that the old gods are a thing, even if you don't believe in them. So you're swearing by these old gods and by the new gods, and it's just makes it more ironclad, is how I see it.
They don't necessarily not or think that there's only one set of gods. Like, many of them will seem to think that, okay, see, these are our gods, those are your gods, and they exist in different realms. I don't know, but
Oh, that's with the red lady.
But right, she thinks a little differently. But the others, I mean, didn't the whole continent used to worship the old gods, and then slowly the new gods came in from the southern, like, south up, basically. So I think, I
Mhm.
mean, as that change was made, I feel like over the centuries, they probably, I don't think the saying old gods and new gods would have been something brand new. I think that would have maybe come along as people started changing over to it.
Yeah. I agree with all of that. I think it's this compounding of the cultures where, like nowadays, all of us here, um, with the exception of maybe Gary, 30s, he acts like he's 20 sometimes. We say, like, call me, right? And you go like this, right? No, there are no phones that are like this, right? But this is what you say for call me. I think it's one of those types of things where you say the old gods and the new. It's just that's no longer the primary, but it is something that influenced how we got to where we are. So I kind of see it like that a little bit, where it's
Still
just
say
something
hang up
that,
the phone.
yeah, exactly, right. Yeah, I'm going to hang up now, and there's no receiver to put it on. It's just one of those things that people understand what you mean when you say that, versus saying, like Gary just mentioned, maybe rather than naming a specific name that may have existed for one of the old gods, you just say by the old gods. or by the new. You don't necessarily always say by the light of the seven. So yeah, it's just something that maybe the common person knows, and that's probably where part of that vernacular comes from.
All right. And final thing is just to touch on a little bit there. So Bran has a vision there of the seas rising up over Winterfell's walls there, and killing basically a lot of people with inside, and even sees Sir Roderick dead. And Nick, just to clarify this again too for everyone as a reminder, Winterfell is nowhere close to the seas. It is basically somewhat centered inland of the north, right?
Right. Not the same distance, but think of it like Salt Lake City. It's definitely in the western side of the country, but it is nowhere near the coast.
Okay. So Bran has this vision there that he shares with Asha about the seas rising up and kind of coming over the walls of Winterfell. And then also too, there's he's kind of in the hall there, kind of having a council session with some of the lords basically, and some of the people of the realm who are coming up with problems to him basically because he's the Lord of Winterfell now that Robb has gone to war. They're talking about how Torrhen Square has been invaded by Ironborn, I believe they mentioned there. So Bran sends as many men as they can kind of find basically to Torrhen Square. Do we kind of think that's a little naive of Bran basically? I mean, as we kind of come to find out here, I don't want to jump too far ahead into the next episode, but as we kind of come to find out there with like the next episode there, do we think it's a little kind of naive of Bran of thinking like, oh, nothing's ever going to come up this far, I'll just send everybody, like I'll just say, yeah, grab everybody you can and go help Torrhen Square?
Well, he doesn't think that it's the Ironborn that invade Torrens Torrens Square. He thinks it's the Lannisters. And on that assumption, even though it's a faulty assumption, it makes sense that they wouldn't go too much further north because their lines of supply are already bad.
Right.
They have nowhere to, I guess, hold up. That makes sense to me if you can think it's the Lannisters. Should maybe he have said, hey, do we have any like reconnaissance on who this actually is? Is it the wildlings, maybe? Who is it? Yeah, I think he should have done that.
I agree, and I think like I can see rushing to defend Torrhen Square, and I guess also because for me, I would think, why would they come take Winterfell? They're never gonna be able to hold it, except for it does happen. So I don't know. It's hard for me. I want to take Bran's side because I'm like, oh look, he was trying to protect people. Also, he's like what 12, but maybe it was a little bit. He probably should have kept a few more. I don't know if that would have helped because the place was taken by stealth anyway.
I guess like the few remaining adults around him are the Maester and the battle the guy who ends up leaving.
Master of
Like
Arms.
those are the two main role models he has left. He has those two that are still alive, and then he has his dad, who is honor bound, and his mom, who is very much just a loyal lord and lady. So I feel like the people, even when he says that line, the whatever that gentleman is who's still there, the head of his guard leaves. The head of his guard was super happy that he made that decision. He acknowledges that that was the right decision.
I was gonna say, oh goodness sakes, map. I know that people who are just listening to this can't quite see it, but way over here is the stony shore towards the Iron Islands, where they're told to go attack. This would be right on the coast here. But then they say go get Torrhen Square, which is way up over here. So it's a good ways up in this river inland that they're going to go to from where Winterfell is way up here. So they are close in the north, still a good ways from the south. Yeah, the Ironborn have actually come a good ways inland to come attack them. So I think that, to answer the question, I wanted to double check how close that actual distance was. That really kind of solidifies. Yeah, I think that it seems odd that they would be attacked that close, or that someone would conceivably come in that far inland. And so, yeah, it could be that they don't perceive that that's a valuable, a warranted threat. It might just be some small thing, because they say siege, like they're being attacked, but it doesn't say like they're being attacked in mass or by a huge threat from the sea or anything like that. So, yeah, maybe if it's a large threat, just send a bunch of people to squelch it quick.
I can see waiting to get more information. Oh, sorry. But I also could see this also going back to Robb Stark from maybe he should have left a few more men back.
Right.
No matter what you do, have enough men somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess the last thing that I want to make a comment on this is they also don't know they have a ringer. No one's aware of the betrayal of Theon Greyjoy and the knowledge that Theon Greyjoy has of the North. He grew up in the North, so there's no way you could account for that.
Exactly.
Absolutely, yeah. No doubt he's probably been to Torrhen Square and knows the ins and outs of that castle.
Good point, and I'm sure that helps him ridiculously in terms of taking Winterfell by stealth, because would the Ironborn have been able to take a castle so far inland without any clue where there's no way they're not going to get lost a dozen times on the way.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if Winterfell's in like a very if Winterfell's in a state of mind that they're not preparing for siege, doors are going to be open, like gates are going to be open, people are going to be just assume it's another group of travelers on the road.
Yeah, a slight lax around the castle and everything like that, because it's kind of maybe hubris of like, well, we're so far north, nobody will ever come bother us way up here.
Mm-hmm. Just while I have the book here, I flipped the page again, and they have a picture on here of Winterfell. Again, when you talk about like storming the castle, yeah, the Ironborn are in their ships, and they're that far inland already. It's not like they can stay out in the bay and stay well well placed because they're used to fighting and reading. Like Winterfell, I mean, in the show, they can only have so big a budget here in season 2, but the true castle of Winterfell is meant to be the largest building, kind of in outside the winter town there. As far as in the north, it's this monstrosity of a building. It is not this smaller castle that it's kind of depicted as with the one courtyard in the show at this point.
All right.
You shaking your head at me, Tyler? Did you disagree?
I was shaking my head because your picture is blurry. So you showing us pictures doesn't really help all that much.
You have the worst webcam of all of us, and yeah, so it's very, very hard to see whatever you're holding up.
I thought it was just this general dislike at everything I have to say.
That too, yes.
A little bit of that.
Okay. Anyone else have anything else to touch on for episode 5? Everyone's looking good here. All right, we'll move on to episode 6 then. The Old Gods and the New, which basically opens up with the attack on Winterfell, the storming of the castle by the Greyjoys there. Not the Greyjoys, the Ironborn, sorry. So, we've kind of touched on Theon a lot here in some of our earlier episodes with like his hesitancy to do basically anything there, it feels like. So just kind of reading his kind of body language and everything like that, it seems like he is so hesitant to really do anything to like anyone there. Basically, he wants to take the castle. He wants to show like his father that he can do this and everything like that. But he just seems so hesitant to kind of do anything about it, like as far as hurting anyone. So I guess it seems like he's talking to even like Bran as a child there. Like he's talking like down to Bran as a child there when he says, "Oh, I've taken your castle. You need to, give it over to me," when Bran's laying in his bed. And Bran's like, "Theon, what the hell are you doing?" So I was just kind of wondering here, like, does anyone else kind of feel like they're picking up on that kind of body language of like Theon is doing this, but it doesn't seem like he wants to do this?
I think he wants to. Oh, go for it, Gary.
I pick up on Theon's body language. I made a note of how all the different people interacted with Theon, because all of these characters had known Theon most of his life. So like how Bran interacted with him the first time, how the Maester interacted the first time, and how the I keep on forgetting the guard, the head of the guard, what his name is.
Sir Roderick.
Sir Roderick. How all of them kind of individually are kind of like taken, kind of shocked by this and don't know how to interact. And so it's from Theon, he doesn't know how to communicate like as an enemy, because he's never known any of these. None of these people have ever been like mean to him or like thought of him as an enemy. They are all just completely sideswiped by the whole interaction. Like it could have been that the Ironborn attacked Winterfell, but it just seemed like an extra like dagger in the back that it was someone they've known for so long. So,
but I think that even Bran has the line in there. Did you always hate us?
Oof.
I wanted to back up here real quickly too. I realized I forgot to do the synopsis of both episodes. So the Ghost of Harrenhal reads, Tyrion investigates a secret weapon that King Joffrey plans to use against Stannis, which we discovered was the Dragonfire. Meanwhile, as a token for saving his life, Jaqen H'ghar offers to kill 3 people that Arya chooses. And then the Old Gods and the New, Theon seizes control of Winterfell. Jon captures a wildling named Ygritte. The people of King's Landing begin to turn against King Joffrey. Daenerys looks to buy ships to sail for the Seven Kingdoms. Okay. Steven, I'll go to you this time. What do you got for questions on this episode?
So on this episode, I guess the 2 things that most stood out for me are obviously Theon's betrayal. That's the big one, and his taking of. We just talked about it a little bit. He goes over by stealth. He takes... I'm not sure the logistics of how that would actually work, taking an entire massive castle with a shipload of men. Seems sus to me, as sus as heck. But then it's... they do take it, and he doesn't really have any real ideas of how to keep the area. He says, "Oh, I sent to my sister for 500 men." What do you do if they don't get that raven? You're fucked. It's gone. It is a very, very poor decision. It's a very undefensible position. It would have made more sense if he had taken Winterfell, burnt Winterfell, and stolen all its crap. Yeah, because Winterfell is probably where you're holding all the grain for the entire north. If you really want to hurt the north, that's what you do right there. He doesn't really think about that, and it makes sense. He's not looking to burn Winterfell; it is his home. So, I mean, it doesn't make sense from a logical perspective, but it makes sense from what he's trying to accomplish.
And people say I'm dark. Steven's one is like, burn it all, motherfucker.
I mean, so that's exactly how I would play it if I was him. I would go in. If you are able to actually avoid the army that they send at you, and you are rapers and reavers is how they call themselves. Yep. Then you go to each town, you burn each town, you take the food you need to move to the next town, and you do that. And you say, you dare them to catch up to you. Hey, yeah, you think you can get me? Go for it. And that's what you're doing. You're hurting someone. Raping and reaving is not capturing. It is, you're being basically a terrorist, and you're being a Viking, and that's all it is.
We do not so.
Yeah, I guess that's an interesting point Stephen brought up, because Sir Roderick, he would have been the only defense that came back. And I'm guessing that all they would have needed to do is go in there, like, burn it to the ground, steal all the grain, steal all that, put it back in the ship, and sail the hell away. And by the time anybody gets there, like, and that's a spoil, is like, that would be something great to show his dad, is like, you set such low expectations to me of fishing villages. I went in, I distracted them, I used my tactical knowledge against them, I got a whole bunch of, like, valuables, and I got the hell out of there. Like, and everyone in my ship got all the raping and pillaging they wanted, and I didn't have to kill Bran, or you know, they just would have a burnt city when I'm done. Not my problem.
Or, I mean, you could take them as hostage if you really want leverage over the north.
Right.
Yeah. Two very, very defenseless lords. Like,
also, I love your comment, Stephen, about his sister. He sent his raven to her to demand that, because one, she's been so helpful so far to him, and two, he clearly still doesn't understand where he stands. Like, he keeps expecting her to do whatever he tells her to do. He is still missing a fundamental understanding of how Ironborn work. Like, it's not his fault. He was not raised with them, but he, like you said, he doesn't have the right end game here for an Ironborn. He doesn't have a plan that's going to work for him.
All right.
So I guess my second point there, and this is transitioning halfway through the continent, is Joffrey's slaughter of the people that throw a piece of horseshit at him, and what in the show is almost rape of Sansa, and in the book is the rape of the woman who is she's the Lord. What is her name, Amanda? Or Tyler? Do you remember?
It's like Lollies or something.
Yeah, Lollies. That's exactly who it is. The rape of Lollies. What?
Who is Lollies?
Lolly. So in the book, Tyrion's wench doesn't actually get assigned to Sansa. She gets assigned to this other lesser lord named Lollies. And this is so they combine the characters just to combine people and not have to explain all these people. But in that riot, Lollies is taken aside, raped multiple times. Her mind is basically kind of broken.
Dang.
It's incredibly, incredibly brutal. And it is something that Joffrey doesn't care much about, that nobody cares much about. Eventually, they just I guess that's going a little far forward, but eventually since Lollies as a character isn't in the rest of the show, eventually they just say, it's her own damn fault for having blah blah blah, basically, and it's
Dang.
absolutely horrible. And that's one of the things while I'm watching that is just where we're focusing so much, and this actually goes a little bit back. We're focusing so much on the military fighting and so much on the hand-to-hand combat and blah blah blah. We're forgetting it's the actual horrors of this. I mean, the Ironborn say, "Yeah, we rape and pillage," and everyone goes, "Ah ha ha, they're so cool." I mean, that's not cool at all. That's horrible. That's absolutely fucking horrible.
Right.
And this is exactly what happens down there. And Joffrey, again, is just, kill them all, blah, blah, blah. And it speaks to just a blasé-ness against the horrors committed by these troops, basically.
Yep. Very valid point.
All right. Do you have anything else there, Steven?
No, that's it for me.
Nick?
We talked a little bit on the point I had about Theon's interaction with the storming, so I'm not going to reiterate that. But I did kind of have a thought. It's different, so I'll amend it a little bit. But that interaction that they just talked about, too, with... Joffrey definitely attacks the people, and I was going to comment, too, about the brutality of that. But really, that struck a nerve talking about the everyday citizenry in town, right, who are just kind of being put upon with either the, in the financial hierarchy or the social structure, but also when this comes down, their lives are for nothing. Joffrey says, kill them all because he's upset at them. There's no, trial amongst your peers. There's no held, accountable for your actions. It's just if the king wants you dead, like Amanda, like you just said, your head's off. It's just, it happens. At his whim. And so that speaks to some of the power that we've kind of talked about for some of these characters who have that might behind them. But yeah, it is very, there's not really a question, I guess, from this. It's just me rambling. But yeah, it's this unique structure in the world that's being developed here that we see that they're just kind of cattle, right, in those moments. And it is very heart-wrenching. You're telling those poor citizens to be better? That's rough, Gary.
That's all Gary cares about. That's why he's a Vikings fan, honestly.
Oh!
Harsh.
Yeah, no. So it was rough, but it's kind of something we've seen throughout the show, right? I mean, these people are. If you're not one of the characters, you do have a developing story, and we hope that we get to see a lot of these characters survive to the end of this thing. But it's interesting to see how, as they're playing the game, some of them are not playing well, and they just, and there's no repercussion. There's no written song about how they were a great character. It's just, well, they're gone now.
Yeah.
There are 2 points I wanted to talk. Well, actually, I think 3 points that I wrote down. I wanted to bring up about this. Nope, it's only 2. I'm rereading my thing wrong here. There's a little part before the riot happens there where Sansa kind of backtalks Joffrey there a little bit. I completely forget exactly what she says, but she says something. Joffrey's like, "What did you say? Oh, did you know this or that happened or something like that?" She basically completely changes what she said on him there, which I thought was again, it's Sansa kind of trying to kind of come out just a little bit from her captivity there, basically. Yeah. And then also too, kind of towards the end of this, Sansa is sitting there questioning, why do these people hate me? Why did these people want to try to do this bad stuff to me when she's just, after she's been rescued by Sandor there? And it's kind of her kind of learning that harsh reality about the people's hatred of the Highborns there, because these people in the city are basically being starved while these people up in the castle are living life large and to the fullest there, and they're not concerned about food or anything like that. Not concerned really too much about the war, but Sansa kind of, this is like one of her being brought back down to reality of like, hey, there's a world going on outside of the walls of the castle that you need to be aware of.
That interaction with Sandor is very much like a character study in Sandor, that like he could give zero fucks about any of those guys. Like the guy tried to run off, he just killed them all. Like, no, like, you're dead. Like, you got in my way, you're dead. And then he's just so nice to Sansa, and just this like very much like shadows of he's just the mountain's little brother, someone who's like, but unlike the mountain who is a great warrior, he's just someone who's been just humiliated his entire life. So
I wouldn't say the Hound's been humiliated his entire life. There's been people snickering at him his entire life because of what his brother did to him. But he's a good warrior in his own right there.
I agree with that, definitely.
Like, for being a lord, and not only being a lord, but being a lord, he's not a lord?
He's just a knight.
I don't think he's a lord, he's a sir, yeah, a knight.
I was gonna say, so Sandor clicked the mountain isn't a lord. I just assumed he was a lord, but they're both just knights under Tywin Lannister.
I think Sandor maybe becomes a knight or a lord later on. I'm not sure he's a lord yet.
I think it's like the designated knights that defend given houses. Like the Cleganes have a house, but the lord is really just the person who's in charge of the given areas of that place. And then there's the Lord Paramount, who's the leader of that particular, the Reach, the River, the North, all this stuff. Like the Starks are the lords of Winterfell, and Lord Paramount of the North, you could say. But I don't think that everyone who has a castle, because sorry if my picture was really crappy, Tyler. Lower your standards. But if all the other houses that are in the North have people who live in those houses, I don't think each one of them is a lord per se. There's other highborn families.
But just the contradiction of the two brothers, like his older brother is Tywin's mad dog. So like,
yeah, absolutely.
His brother is like a very like high level knight, and the Hound is literally just the prince's bodyguard for most of the episodes up until now. Now he's the king, but he's still not a member of the King's Guard. The Hound is just a guy who's around.
No, I thought they made the Hound a member of the King's Guard there when they kicked Sir Barristan Selmy out.
They did? I couldn't remember if that's...
I think he wears like the gold armor and stuff for like an episode, but then he reverts back to the black armor that he's normally seen in.
That would maybe he is a member of the King's Guard, but yes, just anyway. But also, you missed the major point, was that Marcella, someone who I think maybe has had 3 lines in the entire show, gets shipped off.
Yeah.
Yep. Tyrion fulfills his plan to ship Marcella off to Dorne to be married off to one of the princes there, per his plot there to root out who he can trust and who he can't.
Well, also too, like he'd said that in premise to root out who he can trust and who he can't, but then when Cersei does confront him about that, and she's throwing stuff off the table in a fit of rage about it, he is, I think, honestly saying it would help solidify Dorne as potential allies if they are married into the crown, so that if we are attacked or Robb and his army from the north gets down to us, we can bring up the army from Dorne too. Like, I think that there's, I don't know how much he's maybe bought into that as a possibility, but I think that that's something he's kind of hoping for as well. He's not just sending her off to get at his sister.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I saw it that way.
It does also
an interesting interaction, because at no point does Cersei even know that there were multiple offers. So
right.
I just assumed that whole interaction was just like the one plan that Cersei knew about, that's the plan we have to stick with now. Like, I can't even pretend that there were other plans. Like, this is what you get. Anyway, sorry I interrupted you, Amanda.
Oh, you're fine. I wonder if he knew which one was most likely to. But yeah, either way, I mean, he's got a plan there. He's doing that. But it also mentions, like, I mean, that he cares for his niece and nephews. Oh, niece and nephew. I don't know if he really cares about Joffrey, honestly. He even says at one point, "The king's lost. I'm worried about the rest of us," or something.
Yeah.
But I mean, in one of Cersei's few redeeming qualities, it shows how much she really does care for her children. Like, she's not gonna, doesn't forgive Tyrion for this. She tells him, like, I hope that you love somebody as much as I do, so that you know what it's like to lose someone when I take them from you.
Right.
And never was a threat more quietly and terrifyingly uttered.
Maybe even going back into the statement about Cersei from the last episode, she's just ignorant to the ways of war, because if King's Landing is sacked and Lord Tywin's army is destroyed, like, him sending off Marcella is the last, like, is keeping that bloodline alive, like, just sort of not keeping all your eggs in one basket. Whereas all Cersei worries about is keeping her children close.
Yeah.
And I'd argue that it is one of her worst qualities is her love for her family that much. Just because you have a lot of people out there who will do the damnedest things for love, as Jamie has once said. And it's, I think Gary's right. I don't think she's necessarily cares about the happiness of her children. I think she cares about, I don't know if you want to say the well-being of your children, but cares about them being close and cares about them being alive. And that's...
Yeah.
Okay, one point that I just literally am trying to hold in my laughter is that Steven said that Cersei loves her family, and all I can think about is her cousin who she's sleeping with. Because she loves
Lancel
Lannister. She
Lancel.
Anyway.
You want to get a little love from Lancel?
That is all. Back to you.
All right, Nick, I believe we're still on you. Did you have more questions there?
No. Those were the two on those interactions.
All right, Gary, what do you got first?
Most of my notes from this episode revolve around Tywin and Harrenhal. First, as I said, I had a question that literally answered itself, which was, who was Lord Tywin belittling for not being able to read? And that is a character who you later find out is Armor Lorch, the gentleman who dies at the end of the episode. I was going to ask anyone who's more familiar with the books, is he someone of any note? Or is he just a guy? Or a combination of several characters?
Red shirt.
Don't know off the top of my head.
I honestly don't remember.
Me either. Now that you say his name, it sounds more familiar, but I don't remember.
Really made a note while I was watching the episode of, like, is this the Mountain? Because as he, obviously just an unnamed character in the original War Council, and he's like, why don't you go to what you know, which is sacking cities and stuff. And I was like, oh, that could be the Mountain. And then you see him
terrorizing the peasantry.
Really mountain-ish character.
Yeah.
And that
I think
we're only on mountain number 1 at this point. Maybe
we're on mountain number 2.
Can't keep up with all those mountains. Another interesting thing I found in Tywin's area was that Lord Baelish appears, and you get the first introduction of, obviously in this, up to this point in the season, Littlefinger has not stayed in the same plot, or same town for more than an episode or two. Like, he's kind of sort of been moving around.
He must have a great travel agent, because he's just there.
Yeah.
And it's basically that interaction with Tywin is Littlefinger trying to negotiate what forget what the Tyrell gal's name is.
Marjorie.
Marjorie trying to negotiate Marjorie, and it literally repeating, as things happen in the real world, like Marjorie wants to be the queen, like just communicating that to Tywin because, ultimately, at least at surface level, Littlefinger is a supporter of Tywin and the crown. So that's who he's serving. But I just thought it was an interesting, on a rewatch, especially on a rewatch, like not realizing that those bricks were being laid this early in the season or the show. I don't remember when.
I would make one correction, Gary. It's kind of a funny one. Littlefinger is working with Tywin, but he only cares about himself. He is ultimately looking for making himself move up higher and higher in the chain of life.
Well, climbing a ladder,
knows as it either were. Tywin or Tyrion can get him there, because I think the mission, his travel agent's mission was originally got sent by Tyrion to get Catelyn. Was it Catelyn?
Yep.
Oh, to do the prisoner exchange, and as part of that, I'm sure at this point unseen is that Littlefinger's is communicating to Tywin what the plan is, because it's probably just as imperative to Tywin that he gets his son back, because Tywin could give two shits about Sansa Stark. Like he just wants his son back. Like he just wants his son back. He doesn't care anything about the Starks. In the grand scheme of life, he doesn't care anything about the Starks. Like they're so below him on the give a fuck scale. So, yes. But anyway, that was all my questions for that area. Was just sort of more Tywin. Good introduction to him this season.
We got another guy. Great scene between Tywin and Arya there, where Arya again is kind of stepping her bounds there and asks Tywin if he knew his father, which he had kind of like a nice revealing scene that he kind of despised his father because he felt like his father was basically going to slowly destroy their house legacy there.
I didn't catch that. I mean, I do remember there was a conversation about his father and sort of like those two becoming buddy, but I didn't catch the undertones of Tywin's going back. I think it was earlier his last season, about his conversation with Jaime about wanting to set up their family for the future, setting a legacy. That's interesting. You caught that. I did not, but I don't know. I was gonna say grand declaration. Tywin. Second favorite character in the show, right behind Joffrey. Second best character.
All right, Gary was a supporter of House Lannister. Everyone remember that.
Terrible.
They say Lannister always pays their debts, so just make sure to remember that, Gary.
Just like watching everyone's heads on the screen immediately just shake in judgment of Gary. Like we were all.
Where's the be better sign?
All right. What do you got for us, Amanda?
There was when Robb Stark found out about John Greyjoy's capture of Winterfell and betrayed him. A little bit in shock. I mean, I guess who wouldn't be? But he's finding out how bad this is going. At the same time, Roose Bolton is in there saying, you can't just walk back up there, you can delegate, let me do this. And Robb Stark doesn't really take a lot of time for this. He's just like, go, he's going to die for this, bring him back alive, save my brothers. It's a very fast scene. I think this is like one of the major times that Robb Stark is lost, other than his father as well. Absolutely. And he doesn't know what to do. Like, he's far away, he can't help, he's realizing how bad this could be.
Mm-hmm.
He takes almost the first solution that was given to him. I think his mom says something about like, let me talk to him, and he's just like, there will be no talk.
He kind of goes with emotions more than maybe logic a little bit there.
Yeah, and I think he just takes Roose Bolton's plan at like face value and is like, yeah, let's just go. I want their safety. I want Theon alive, and that's it.
Yeah, unloosing the flayed man on your castle is gonna lead to a lot of safety, probably.
Mm-hmm. I had the mentality watching this episode that uh, most of these war battles, like we kind of see the aftermath in that earlier episode of when he beats the Lannisters, and you see I forget her name, but the gal who's doctoring up everybody, and we see like the brutality of war. But really, the Theon attack, I kind of was watching this thinking to myself, was to like a pinprick right in the heart for Rob. Someone that he kind of maybe perceived as a brother, thought, yeah, sure, I'll give you back to your father. Balon Greyjoy seems like a legit guy. Like he didn't even really contemplate that this would go sideways, and so the fact that it has, and his brothers are in turmoil, and his castle is his father's castle, really how he sees it, right? His father's legacy is in shambles. Is something that he's more emotional than rational.
And I mean, even when his father, like when he first raised the banners and all that, it was in reaction to his father. So probably an emotional state, but yet he proceeded with caution. He summoned them all. He had them over for a week. He made all these plans. He answered them. He acted every bit the perfect lord. But in this one, it's like he was like, "Oh God, my brothers, like I don't know if it's because they're younger, because he thought they were safe, or because he's already lost his father and his sisters possibly, and doesn't want to lose any more." But he reacts quickly and dropped. He doesn't know this yet, but I mean, this is just another instant reaction. Whereas Winterfell sent those men off with just take them and go quick. He's doing the exact same thing.
Also, I would say on a rewatch, like one of those times where on a rewatch you realize how much more important moving forward Lord Bolton is. I'm sure on my 1st watching the show, you're just like, oh yeah, it's just this guy.
Missed a couple times, sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with you there.
Do you remember thinking he had like something about his eyes? Like he was very like intense eyes, and I was like, okay, well, whatever. They picked a great guy for him.
Oh yeah,
From the
creepy as crud.
Yeah, and in the book he's supposed to be just really pale too, because he bleeds himself with leeches a lot, I believe.
Yep.
And so he has a really weird look to him, and I think that even though he doesn't bleed himself in the show, he still has that kind of a scary atmosphere about him.
That cold as ice in his veins. And there was a scene in the book at one point where like when he's debating what to do for his strategy, and Catelyn's talking to him, and he has the misstep when he had a plan, and she was like, who are you going to have lead that one? And he suggests somebody else because somebody else was asking for it, and she in her head she's like, that's his first misstep, how do I make him see it without just poking Froll's pride? And she just observed what the person was like, and then she was like, but for this one, what would you want? And he was like, I'd probably want cold, daring ice. And so he chooses Roose Bolton to lead whatever that, I don't remember what the
interesting
was. Like he did learn, and I also thought it was interesting in the book to show that Catelyn Stark, she does have some qualities that we don't really see at all really well in the show. Not that a lot of those show very well at all. She's very single-minded in the show.
I guess.
But she's got a few she's got a couple military ones. She can know when she's trying. She helped him on this. So Robb Stark's trying. He's got good gifts when it comes to war.
I think we did actually see, like, we kind of criticized Catelyn's role in the show there a little bit of just being complaining about everything and all that. But like at the beginning of the episode 5 there, she was talking to Renly, and they did come to some terms and agreement that we had talked about there. So she did have some quality there in negotiations, but it ended up negotiations were cut short, literally. And then too, I think yeah, like the Roose Bolton's description in the books, I always remember that standing out because he was like thin slit. I think it was like the thin slit eyes and like thin lips and everything like that too. He was just like they kind of made him out to be like a very like, I think gaunt maybe is the word I'm thinking of here, but just this kind of spooky, creepy figure, which again, props to the actor that they chose for this too. He kind of pulled that look off there fairly well, because like you see him a couple of times in the show before this, and you kind of like, that guy just doesn't look right, a little bit there. But again,
strikes me the wrong way. Yeah.
Yes, but just again, props to the actor for how he played that.
I don't know. I was just thinking as we were talking about Bruce Bolton about how he he's sort of playing a different Game of Thrones, which is that if his status in life gets better if there's a king of the north, because then he becomes a great lord of a new kingdom. And if there's ever gonna give advice, it's like, oh well, I have just the guy for this. Like, let me have my son do this, and then if he wins, you owe me a favor. I saved the great Stark house.
Sure. Very good
His
point.
power lust, I think, is something that I think I noticed a little later on in the show. But I just, as on a rewatch, you start to see some of those tinglings. Anyway, that's all I had. Back to you, Tyler.
Amanda, did you have anything more to cover there?
That was one of the ones that I thought was interesting because I don't think I noticed that when I first watched the show, honestly.
All right. The final thing I have for discussion here is just going back to my favorite character, Mr. Jon Snow, up north of the wall there. Him and the group that he's with of rangers kind of descend upon the wildlings there, and that's where we meet Ygritte there, because they basically sneak up and take out this group there. But Jon hesitates to kill Ygritte, and I'm kind of wondering, like, why? Why does Jon hesitate? That is that kind of like I think, kind of thinking about it and talking about it a little bit here, it's like I can kind of see, like, maybe it's, I mean, up till this point, I don't believe he's killed anyone yet in the show, and going back to being the honorable thing, it's probably not a very honorable thing to kill a woman in this universe or this world, especially. I mean, I'm sure there's probably like some slight attraction of him. Like, she's a very nice looking gal and everything like that too. But I was just kind of wondering, like, what everyone else's take on that of why does Jon hesitate to kill a wildling who would obviously not return the favor?
I was just comparing it to Theon's conversation earlier on about, oh, we're gonna throw this lord in the dungeon, because that's how he was raised. Is like, you've already won the castle. Like, this guy's a prick, but he's just doing his job. Like, just throw him in the dungeons. We don't need to kill him. Like, he's just doing his job. And the same with Jon's maybe outlook on Ygritte. Fun names that are hard to spell. Because she's just doing her job. Like, she's just like honoring her house, which is the wildlings. So no reason to kill her just because she grew up north of the wall. So that's how I took it. That's not how he was raised.
And to echo that as well, I think Jon is a very I maybe not moral is the way to put it, but he has a set of ideals that he subscribes to, and the wanton murder of prisoners is not among that.
Yeah.
Especially for something that they're fighting a fair war, according to him. He captured them fairly, and they are now his prisoner. You don't just murder your prisoners, even if it is out of expediency, I should say.
Right. And I'm sure all of his life, when he was assuming that when he wanted to envision himself fighting wildlings, he would have imagined somebody coming at him in battle, this big, strong guy with a club, not what to him looks like a scared woman, looks helpless to him. What does he know? Still, it's and then there's everything else, like you said. I think all these reasons are good.
I have a question, and I am actually going to pose this one to Amanda real quick. Do you think that the characters in Game of Thrones, especially most specifically the female characters, are always undervalued for their martial prowess, and then are kind of able to come back and take people from behind because nobody values their prowess, whether it be Brienne, Ygritte?
Oh, certainly. I mean, even those that know that Brienne was like a knight, they still would, because they thought she was a woman, because they undervalued her, they'd still misjudge her. Even if you think someone's strong, if you think little of them, it's really hard to take them seriously.
That's not a bad.
I mean, And maybe it fits the historical context because that's how it's done for centuries. Like, at the same time, I mean, I don't feel bad for them when they underestimate what they're gonna do, and then especially for the characters who have been shown time and time again, like anyone go down any second.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I agree with all those great sentiments. Absolutely. Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for me. Last call for questions here. Does anyone have anything for this episode we want to talk about, or?
I guess the only other thing I had about Ygritte was that in real life she's married to Jon Snow.
Yes.
Right? I wanted to say that too.
Her and Kit Harington.
That's where Jon Snow meets his wife.
Yes.
Interesting on a rewatch of like, oh, these people, like literally, you're probably watching the slow evolution of these people getting to know each other in real life. So I don't know, boring behind the scenes shit.
Yes. All right. Well.
I also, sorry. I did remember reading in the book. It's interesting because I had already seen what Ygritte looked like when I got to this part of the books, but at least in the movies. But in the books, Jon even says, like, for people that he had seen, she was not that attractive. She would have been considered plain. For the wildlings, she was considered a rare beauty because she had red hair, which was considered lucky and kissed by fire. So different beauty standards, different areas.
Yeah. Interesting.
I do have one last thing that we didn't touch on that I think is pretty important. The very end of this episode, there's a break-in. One of Daenerys's maids is killed, and her dragon is stolen. Dun, dun, dun!
Where are my dragons?
Where are my dragons?
Yeah.
Meme.
Okay.
Hermager.
On a rewatch, I was interested if all of the quote-unquote main characters in her Khalasar disappeared, or they're dead, or they're with her, because I don't know if it explains where Jorah is. I don't think it explains where their handmaiden is, whether that was all of her guard, or I think there were some guards that were with her because they shout like, "Oh my God!" and then some other members of the Khalasar run in.
It's almost like the size of the Dothraki army grows or shrinks as needed there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Did I do a count? I think I did a Dothraki count at the end of episode 1. It was like
I think
100 something.
Yeah.
And when you see them standing in front of Karth, I mean, it looks like there's like 15 of them.
Yeah, exactly.
When they keep losing people.
Yep.
It's a very screenwriter-made decision based on how many candles do we need to light and how many Dothraki do we need to clothe.
All right. Everybody good then? Go to the home stretch here of the episode.
Good stuff.
All right. So for next time, we will be watching episode 7, A Man Without Honor, and episode 8, The Prince of Winterfell. Episode 7 and episode 8 for next time there. That'll do it basically for us here at the Rewatch podcast. We thank everybody for listening, taking their time to have us in their ear holes for however long, especially Gary. I mean, I have to apologize all the time for Gary.
We all have to apologize for Gary.
Especially for his Lord of the Rings views.
Yeah.
Oh my God! Yeah, we're gonna get to that.
We'll talk about that off air here. Thanks everyone for listening. Hope you have a good one.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.